They called his ranch the Vulture's Roost, because only death used to come looking for Iron Bill. He buried his guns, his name, and his past, until a terrified child knocked on his door at sundown. A widow on the run, 2 frightened children, and a debt so cruel it demanded blood. Iron Bill had sworn never to kill again, but some devils don't accept mercy. When evil came for the innocent, a broken man chose to rise, and the West would remember his name. Watch till the end to uncover what happens next. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and if these Western stories bring you a little peace, saddle up and subscribe. Your support helps keep them coming.
The ranch was called the Vulture's Roost, though no honest man knew why. Perhaps it was because its owner Iron Bill had once been an apex predator in the grimy, lawless settlements of the Wyoming Territory. Bill, a towering figure whose silence carried more weight than any gunshot, lived there now, isolated miles from the fading lights of the town of Onyx Pass. He'd traded his cut-down scattergun for a branding iron, his blood-soaked past for the dry, unforgiving future of a cattleman. His retreat was not born of piety but of profound, searing grief. The violence he had once mastered had clawed back at him, stealing his beloved wife Eleanor in a senseless roadside ambush meant for him. The rage had since cooled into a brittle, hard shell around his soul, a protective mechanism that held the memory of her laughter and the stench of his guilt equally close. He was a man carved from granite and haunted by ghosts. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in bruised purples and angry reds, when a small sound, frantic and uneven, rattled the door of the main house. Bill, who didn't keep dogs because they made too much noise, drew his Colt Peacemaker before he even turned the knob. Standing on the porch, barely taller than the barrel of Bill's rifle, was a boy, no more than 8 summers old. His face streaked with tears and alkali dust, his small chest heaving like a winded pony. "Mister," the boy gasped, his voice tight with panic. "Mister, you gotta help us. They killed my PA. They're still out there." Bill lowered the pistol slowly, observing the boy's terror. "Who are you, son? And who is us?" "I'm Tom," the boy whispered, desperation shining in his wide, frightened eyes. "My mother Lydia and my little sister Lily. They're close, just past the Cottonwood Creek." "My May," she fainted. "They were chasing us since sundown. Pa told us to run. He kept them back." Tom choked on a sob. "Please, she needs water. Lily is scared." Tom's story, though disjointed, struck a chord in the empty cavity where Bill's heart used to be. The raw fear in the child was genuine. It was the face of the innocent caught in the crossfire, a sight Bill knew too well. "Get inside, Tom. Stay by the fire. Don't touch my guns," Bill commanded, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. He didn't wait for a reply. He grabbed his old wagon coat and hurried to the lean-to where he kept his buckboard. The ride was rough and fast. Tom, perched beside him, navigated them through the fading light. When they reached the cluster of cottonwoods, Bill saw them. Lydia lay still beneath the brush, her dark dress dusted with fine powder. Beside her, a small pale girl, Lily, clung to her mother's hand, too frightened to cry, staring blankly into the darkening woods. Bill, moving with an unnatural speed for his size, scooped the frail woman into his arms. Her skin was cold, her pulse weak. He placed her gently in the wagon bed, then helped Tom and Lily clamber in. The journey back to the roost was conducted in a tense silence broken only by the rhythmic creak of the wheels and Tom's occasional shuddering breath. Back in the ranch house, the air was thick with the scent of coal smoke and fear. Bill cleaned Tom's grazed knee, a superficial injury that Tom had only just noticed, evidence of a fall during their desperate flight. He forced a few spoonfuls of sweetened water between Lydia's lips until her eyelids fluttered, revealing eyes the color of the distant prairie sky. haunted but resolute. When she could finally sit up, propped against a stack of pillows, she looked at Bill, a former villain now acting as their reluctant guardian. "Thank you, mister. Thank you for saving my children. You risked your life for strangers." "It's Iron Bill," he corrected curtly, not wanting gratitude, only the truth. "Tell me what happened. Quick and clean. Who are they?" Lydia swallowed hard, her hand instinctively reaching for Lily, who had fallen asleep, tucked into a blanket beside the hearth. "My husband, Josiah. He was a good man, but he was drowning. He took a substantial loan from a man in Fort Stroud, a devil named Silas Kroll." Bill's eyes narrowed. Kroll. The name was familiar. A ruthless debt collector who had recently consolidated power among the smaller gangs in the territory. Silas came after the first few payments were missed. Lydia continued, her voice trembling but steady. "Josiah's dry goods business collapsed with the last drought. He tried to pay him, but there was nothing left. Silas came back 2 more times, sending threats, sending men. But tonight he didn't send messengers. He came himself, with 2 hardened men. Vipers. They cornered us south of the river." A lone tear tracked a clean path through the dirt on her cheek. "They killed Josiah for the debt. He made us run. He told me, Lydia, run like the wind. Don't look back. Find shelter on the biggest ranch you can find." The confession hung heavy in the air, weighted by tragedy and the cold reality of the frontier. Bill understood the mathematics of debt and death out here. It was a simple equation. "They followed you?" Bill asked, rising to load his rifle. "For miles. They know we escaped. They won't stop, Iron Bill. They'll be here when the sun rises." Her pale face was a study in hopeless resignation. "We've just dragged you into our grave." Bill looked from the desperate mother to the sleeping children. He saw his own lost life reflected in their vulnerability. And for the first time in years, the cold shell around his heart felt a sliver of warmth. A fierce protective instinct mixed with a need for retribution that Eleanor's death had never fully satisfied. "This ranch is my grave, Lydia," Bill said, leaning the rifle against the wall. "It always has been. If they come for you, they come for me. They won't take you." The next morning the air was still and tense, the silence of the ranch an unnatural thing. Just as the sun crested the eastern ridge, turning the sky a brilliant, blinding gold, 2 riders materialized out of the dust cloud on the horizon. They pulled up short of the porch, 2 heavy-set brutes with faces carved by whiskey and malice. One of them, the smaller, meaner-looking of the 2, spat tobacco juice onto the dry earth. "We know they came this way, rancher. The woman and 2 kids. Hand them over, and no trouble comes to your livestock." Bill stepped onto the porch. He was wearing an open vest, his muscular arms visible, and the stark black of his duster made him look like a shadow that had refused to fade. He didn't carry a visible weapon, but his presence was a shield. "You've made a long ride, boys." Bill's voice resonated, low and steady. "Tell your master, Silas Kroll, they are here. They are under the protection of Iron Bill." The 2 men exchanged a nervous glance. Bill's reputation wasn't written on a wanted poster. It was whispered in the back rooms of every saloon between Cheyenne and the Bighorn Mountains. He was the ghost of 1,000 bad decisions. The larger man scoffed, trying to regain his nerve. "You think a name can stop Silas? It can slow him down," Bill replied, his eyes cold and hard. "Now ride, or I'll bury you both before the dust settles." The men, realizing the danger in Bill's calm demeanor, wheeled their horses around and galloped back the way they came. Inside, Lydia watched Bill through the window, an unfamiliar mixture of fear and admiration twisting in her gut. He was a dangerous man, certainly, but he was standing against a greater evil for her sake. The courier arrived back at Kroll's fortified camp later that day. When the messenger repeated Bill's name, Silas Kroll, a man whose cruelty was legendary, froze mid-sentence. His eyes, usually glittering with avarice, became dull with a sudden debilitating dread. Iron Bill, the name meant trouble. a level of violence that even Kroll preferred to avoid. But Kroll was fueled by pride, not sense. He saw the children and the woman as currency, a statement of his absolute power. He convinced himself that Bill, the hermit, was a spent force. The very next day, Kroll rode out alone, dressed immaculately in black wool, looking like a vulture come to collect. He stopped in front of the porch, leaving his horse restless behind him. "Bill," Kroll began, his voice surprisingly smooth, a polished stone covering a rotting core. "I have known you since the days of Red Rock Canyon. We know what you did to leave that place. You're retired. I'm giving you a chance to stay that way." Bill leaned against a post, utterly relaxed, yet coiled like a rattler. "What do you want, Silas?" "I want what's mine. The woman, the boy and the girl. They are the collateral for a bad debt. Hand them over, and we ride away, leaving you and your peace undisturbed." "If you refuse," Kroll's voice hardened, "you create a new enemy today, one that will burn everything you've worked for." "Are they worth dying for, Bill?" "Your kind always thinks life is cheap, Silas," Bill said, meeting Kroll's gaze without flinching. "But sometimes, a debt needs to be paid in blood, and I'm ready to settle an old tab with you anyway." "You're trespassing." Kroll narrowed his eyes, realizing Bill wasn't bluffing. This was no retired rancher. This was the predator he remembered, only older, colder, and more focused. "You've signed your death warrant, Bill, and theirs." Kroll spun his horse violently and disappeared back into the dust. Bill knew Kroll would not come back alone. Kroll would bring his 2 hired men, the vipers Lydia had mentioned. He had a few days, maybe less, before the onslaught. That evening, as Lydia fed the children, a palpable sense of doom settled over the house. Lydia finally broke the silence. "What, Bill? Why are you doing this?" Bill stared into the fire, its light reflecting in his steely eyes. "I told you, trespassing. It's more than that," she insisted, pushing her plate away. "You've given up your peace for us." I saw the look on Kroll's face. "He will kill you. He will kill us all." He turned to her, his expression a mask of pain. "When my wife was killed, Lydia, I didn't raise a hand. I ran. I buried her and I buried my name. And I haven't looked back. I thought peace was hiding from the violence. Now I know. Peace is earned by standing up to the devil. I don't want your gratitude. I want to look a devil like Kroll in the eye and make him pay for taking the innocent. For Eleanor, and for your Josiah." The revelation, laced with raw grief, was a crack in Bill's granite exterior. Lydia's heart ached for him. She walked over and gently placed a hand on his rough, calloused arm. It was a small gesture of comfort, but it was enough to make Bill flinch, a sudden, unfamiliar rush of emotion causing a tremor through his big frame. "If you fight them here, they will burn your home," she said, her voice soft. Bill nodded slowly. "That's why we're not fighting them here." He had a plan, a cold, brutal, final plan forged in the fires of his old life. 2 days later, the 3 men, Silas Kroll and his 2 hired guns, known only as the Hook and Black Jack, were drinking heavily in a small, isolated wooden saloon named The Last Chance near the western fork of the river, well away from the town proper. They were celebrating Kroll's presumed victory, confident in the belief that Bill would surrender the family rather than face them. Bill had tracked them all afternoon. He watched from the ridge as Kroll's horse was hitched outside the flimsy wooden structure. He descended under the cloak of twilight, moving like the shadow he was. He carried a heavy burlap sack and a long smoking fuse. He didn't want a fair fight. He wanted finality. Slipping around the back, Bill doused the walls and foundation with the contents of his sack kerosene, soaking the dry, thirsty wood. He moved quickly, silently, his movements practiced and efficient. This was the only language men like Kroll understood, utter annihilation. He struck a match. The small, fragile flame was the promise of a reckoning. Bill placed the burning stick to the fuse he had laid. He retreated a short distance, sitting on a rock, watching. He heard the muffled laughter and the clinking of glasses from inside the saloon. He gave them a moment to remember the choices they had made. Then the fuse sputtered, catching the kerosene. The dry wood exploded in a roar of yellow and crimson. The sound was deafening, the heat immediate and ferocious. Screams, short-lived and terrifying, erupted from within the inferno, instantly consumed by the rising pillar of fire. The saloon became a blazing pyre, dissolving quickly into ash and smoke. Bill sat there until the roar subsided to a hungry crackle, until the flames began to subside, and the stench of burnt wood and something far worse filled the air. There was no escape. Kroll and his vipers were dead. He rose, the firelight illuminating his grim, determined face. The old violence was still there, but this time it had been channeled to protect, not destroy. He mounted his horse and rode back through the night toward the Vulture's Roost. The morning Bill returned, covered in smoke and silence. Lydia knew. She didn't ask, and he didn't explain. The danger was gone. The atmosphere shifted from stifling dread to cautious relief. Over the next few months, life on the ranch settled into a routine. Tom, recovering from his ordeal, took to following Bill like a shadow, helping him mend fences and feed the stock. Lily, initially shy, would often draw pictures of Bill's imposing figure, always giving him a smiling face. Lydia saw the change in Bill too. The hard shell was softening, chipped away by the simple demands of parenthood and the quiet companionship they shared. They spoke little of the past, communicating instead through shared chores, quiet meals, and the silent acknowledgement of the debt they both owed, a debt of life and sacrifice. One twilight evening, standing on the porch watching the children play, Bill turned to Lydia. "I can't promise you peace, Lydia. This land is too wild, and I'm not a peaceful man, but this ranch is safe now. You and the children can stay. I can provide for you. I want to try. I want to keep you safe." Lydia looked at the strong, scarred man, the reformed monster who had risked everything for her family. She saw the true cost of his past and the fragile hope of his future. She reached out and took his hand, her touch surprisingly firm. "You earned your peace, Bill, and I need a man who knows how to fight for what he loves." She smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that promised healing. "We'll build that peace together." And so the fierce rancher and the grateful widow, united by tragedy and a need for redemption, stood on the porch of the Vulture's Roost. They were married quietly in the nearest settlement weeks later. The children were happy, safe in the knowledge that their terrifying journey had led them to a man whose grit was matched only by the depths of his new, fiercely guarded love. Iron Bill had found the family his soul desperately needed, finally achieving the one thing his former life had denied him, a future worth fighting for.
If you really like our Western stories and want us to continue writing, consider subscribing. It really helps us more than you think.